Hello and welcome to Ancient Egypt. Today I'm going to be talking about the artistic side of Ancient Egypt. We know a lot about how they had pyramids and mummies, but what is the importance of these things? That is what I'm here to talk about. Art is it's a very important role in cultures, especially during the ancient times, because it's a way that we as humans today can understand them long ago. Um, And another thing I'm going to be doing is comparing ancient Greece to ancient Egypt. Um, and the reason why is because I want to show the vast differences between the two, but also the similarities between the two, which is very fascinating because one's in Europe and one's in Africa. And to think that they didn't have cars or planes or any kind of form of transportation that's, speedy, um, is just fascinating because they're spreading ideas through foot and word. And on top of that, different languages. And one of the biggest languages in art is vision. It's very amazing how art can speak for what it is. And I'm here to share that with you. And I do hope that you enjoy. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Walk like an Egyptian. Coffins and Sculptures. As you can see on the left side, there is a picture of a small statue, which is a woman, and she's fully clothed all the way up into her ankles. And you can see that she's wearing a gown-like piece of clothing, and she's even holding it closed. And that is just the sign of how modest this artwork is. However, in further slides, you will see that there's more exposure, and that is because of ancient Greece influence onto the ancient Egyptian art. However, that will be discussed later. Furthermore, there is a statue, um, there is a coffin on the bottom right side, which is King Tut's coffin, and he was known for his intact tomb. His is fully gold, um, and this kind of coffin was made for people that were higher in status in the ancient Egyptian culture. King Tut lived from 1341 BCE to 1323 BCE and was 12th pharaoh of the 18th Egyptian dynasty from 1332 to 1323 BC. And as I said, he's known for his intact tomb, and he's also known for dying at age 19. Many don't know for sure what caused the king's death, but a lot of it's related to his multiple health issues that he had. And he's buried in the Valley of the Kings. So it's very fascinating how much the ancient Egyptians are just obsessed with death, but it's not the dying they're obsessed with. They're obsessed with the ritual and just preserving the body and making sure that that body has a place to go for its afterlife. And that's the importance of what a coffin is. It is art. Like, even if it's not as artistic as this one that you see, it is very artistic overall because it is to value someone that was valued and to continue that value and give them value while they move on to their next step in life. Process of mummification. The ancient Egyptians developed a sophisticated method to preserve a dead body for the afterlife, which is known as mummification. And according to the Canadian Museum of History, these are the materials that they would use, or similar materials would be used. So first, linen, sawdust, lichen, beeswax, resin, natron, which is salt, onion, Nile mud, linen pads, and frankincense. And then the tools that they used to do all of this was brain hooks, oil jars, funnels, and an embalmer's knife. So that's what they would use to do this. Now, what are the steps? According to mylearning.org, these are the steps that it would take to make a mummy. So first you insert the hook through a hole near the nose and pull out part of the brain. And then you'll make a cut on the left side of the body near the tummy and remove all the internal organs, set them out to dry, and then you'll place the lungs, intestines, and stomach and liver inside canopic jars, which will be further discussed. Uh, and then you'll place the heart back inside the body if it was taken out. However, usually it's meant to be kept intact because it is important to the afterlife and moving on. After you do that, you'll rinse inside the body with wine and spices. Then you'll cover the corpse with natron, like I said, salt, for 70 days. After 40 days, you're going to stuff the body with linen or sand to give it a more human shape. And I'm guessing that sawdust is another alternative to being able to stuff the body. And then you will, after 70 days, wrap the body from head to toe in bandages and place it into a sarcophagus, which is a box-like coffin. And if a person had been a pharaoh, he would be placed inside his special burial chamber with his riches and goods and fortunes, so he can be kept with those because those are his belongings. And if they were not as high up in the status of the Egyptian culture, they would still be buried in a coffin, but it would not be as excessive. If you can see on the bottom right, it's more of like what a coffin they would get, as you can compare to the one the slide before where it was all gold. This is wood and designed. So you can see the differences on how their style changes depending on who they're burying. So, without furthermore, let's continue. Canopic jars. As you can see on the right side, there are pictures of what are canopic jars. Canopic jars were a very important part of Egyptian mythology and their concept of afterlife. Hapi, the baboon-headed god, protected the lungs. Duamatif, the jackal-headed god, held the stomach. Seti, the human-headed god, was in charge of the liver, and Kabin-Sinuf was to watch over the intestines. However, Egyptians didn't think that the brain was an essential organ, so what they did was just throw it out after death. But they believed that the heart was merely the seat for the soul, so they left it intact so it could move on with the soul to the next life. So that's the importance of really why they kept the heart in there. Horus the Falcon God. Horus is one of the most significant ancient Egyptian deities. He was worshipped from at least prehistoric Egypt until the Ptolemaic Kingdom and Roman Egypt. Different forms of Horus are recorded in history, and these are treated as distinct gods by Egyptologists. These various forms may possibly be different perceptions of the same multi-layered deity, in which certain attributes or syncretic relationships are emphasized, but not necessarily in opposition, but more complementary to one another. And that's consistent with how ancient Egyptians viewed their multiple facets of reality. And he was portrayed in both the younger and older versions, which you can also see a similar idea with the statue of David. If you've ever seen the statue of David, you've most likely seen the image that Michelangelo had, which was the larger than life size David, which is made out of marble. And then there's the other one, which is Donatello's David, which is a smaller than life version, and he's holding a hat, or he's wearing a hat and holding something in his hand with his weight shifted sort of to one side with his hand on the waist. So and that's a younger version of him. And that's kind of the concept of what the different forms of Horus is talking about. It's the same God, but there's different views of him from different people, and how they were viewed is depicted in their art, or how they viewed him is depicted in their artwork of him. So that's just a comparison to think about.
Statue of Cleopatra VII, Philopator. As you can see on the left side, there is an image of Cleopatra with more exposure, which is contrary to what I mentioned before about their modesty. However, they are taking a little bit more from the Greek art into this, and although it is exposing more, if you compare it to something like Athena in the Greek art, it is not as exposed. In Greek art, they show a lot more detail. In this image of Cleopatra to the left, and it could partially be because of the material, the media that is used, which is black basalt, which is a sort of rock, and the ancient Greeks used marble and stone. So it could just be the shadows that maybe seem a little bit more modest. However, if you look, there's not that, it's a very simplistic detail of a person. And even that, it's not even very humanly correct, where if you look at the ancient Greek art, they've got the proportions a little bit better laid out. So that's one of the interesting things about how ancient Egyptians still showed modesty in their exposure, you could say. And the black basalt statue to the right is one of the most pristine images of the last Egyptian pharaoh, Cleopatra VII, presenting her in a midst of stride, wearing a long form-fitted dress. And the statue reveals the influence of ancient Greek art. Cleopatra wears a corkscrew wig and holds a cornucopia, a horn of plenty, through the front of her headdress, and is adorned with a uraeus, which is royal snakes, and symbolic of Egyptian royalty. In the other hand, she also holds the Ankh, the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic meaning of life. This masterpiece is housed at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. So you can see the same material being used on the one on the right and the one on the left. However, one is clothed but still modest. And that's something that a lot of cultures didn't see as wrong. Ancient Greece didn't see it as nudity, they saw it as beauty, but so did ancient Egyptians with modesty. They saw that as beauty. So it's all about the culture and what the society felt was more accurate to what they felt for how they should expose their body. So that is that. Throne of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun's cuboid-shaped throne was one of the most spectacular things that Howard Carter saw when he first entered the pharaoh's intact tomb back in 1922. It is made from solid wood and covered with sheet gold and silver, and inlaid with semi-precious stone, colored glass, and faience ceramic. The overall style of the throne is one of the most finest examples of Amarna period art, which is reflected in the sun disk on the back rest, symbolizing Iman. More naturally styled birds and plants, scenes of the affectionate royal couple, and the physical features of the pharaoh and his king, who are depicted with a high degree of realism, are also shown throughout the throne. If you're looking to look at some more distinguished arts of ancient Egyptian culture, you can go to historylists.org/art/10-most-distinguished-works of ancient-Egyptian-art.html. And I will have that link in the last slide. But I definitely recommend looking at some of these because it really does show the beauty of what Egyptian art was. And if you can tell, there's a lot of gold, a lot of yellow, warm colors in these pieces of artwork. You don't see that much bland colors, and I think that's partly due to where they were living, because if you look at Egypt, especially ancient Egypt, it has much of a gold undertone to it. So I think a lot of the materials they used, like the sand and stuff, or whatever else they found, was going to be a little bit more of a warmer color. So just take a look at that and realize the differences in artwork from what you've seen in the past. Maybe it's more than just the face masks. However, we will talk about Tutankhamun's death mask in a little bit. Thutmose III from the 15th century BC. This statue was made to honor the king Thutmose III, and he is often referred as one of the greatest rulers of ancient Egypt, which is why there's a statue made after him. However, there's a lot of statues that are made out of rulers and stuff, and not just Egyptian culture, but other cultures that are not just because they were great or whatever, but sometimes as shame. And you can see that in other cultures. But right now, he is known for expanding the Egypt's borders into countries like Syria, Palestine, and more. And he's never lost a battle and launched many successful military campaigns, which is what made him so great. And if you look at that and compare it to, say, King Tutankhamun, King Tut, um, King Tut was also a greatly known leader. However, since he was only a ruler for such a short time because he died at 19, he did not have the time to really be able to expand on his, and I'm still talking about Tutankhamun, expand on his strengths as a leader. So they left him as more of an innocent view because there was not much he had done to cause anything else other than what people saw him as a young, strong leader for what he could be at the time. So that's something that you can think about in the ancient Egyptian culture, that they really did like to worship the better rulers and really, give them a solid view of what people saw before them. So they could see that this was what an example of a good ruler was like, and we want to show that to everyone. And that's what these statues and sculptures are meant for. Thutmose III continued. The gray-wax statue of Thutmose III was found in Karnak-Kashedi in 1904. The statue has a lot of human qualities that are made to admire the king. And if you look at the picture closely, he is standing on his left foot to show a sign of authority. And if you look back into ancient Greek art, you will see this stance called contrapposto, which is where one foot is in front of the other and the weight is shifted from the hips. And this is a stance that you see all throughout Greek art and now coming into the ancient Egyptian art, which is a power stance. It's an authority stance. It is something that shows confidence. And that is what they want to show for Thutmose, because he was a confident, well-known, and greatly admired leader. He is also wearing the Nemes headdress with a stylish belt. The Karnak-Kashedi is the largest ever found statues dating from early dynastic to the Greco-Roman period. Georges Legrain, working under the supervision of Gaston Maspero, unearthed the Kashedi in 1904 by chance in the courtyard of the Karnak Temple at Luxor, ancient Thebes. The finds also included the famous statue of Tutankhamun as the god Khonsu. Tutankhamun's mask. The funerary mask of Tutankhamun, also known as King Tut, is the death mask of the 18th dynasty ancient Egyptian pharaoh King Tut from 1332 to 1323 BC. He was discovered by Howard Carter in 1925 in tomb KV62 and is now housed in an Egyptian museum in Cairo. It's one of the most well-known works of art in the world, and researchers suggested that it may have originally been for a queen, Nefertiti. Her royal name was found in a partly erased cartouche on the inside of the mask. Tutankhamun's mask continued. According to historyofmasks.net, the ancient Egypt's masks were used for two primary purposes: death masks and ritual masks. So the death mask would be placed over the body after death, and it would be the final step before fully closing the coffin, and it was done during mummification. And the reason that death masks were used was because it was very important for the soul to be able to recognize the body so it could return to it. And death masks were made in the likeness of the deceased and from different materials. Most of them were made from wood, and those were the cheaper, like lower class people that would have those. However, as you got higher in class, royal death masks were made from precious materials like gold or gold leaves on bronze. And the famous, of course, most famous is Tutankhamun's. And you've probably seen this mask, these two pictures. You've probably seen these either in your textbook, in a pamphlet, at a museum. You might not have seen them in person, but you've seen this image before. And that is because it truly is one of the most well-known pieces of art in not just the Egyptian culture, but overall. And that's something that I would like to point out is they call this art. It was art. The mask was a piece of art that they were able to express who the body that passed was through the mask. So a lot of the times the eyes were slightly enlarged with a faint smile and painted with jewelry and makeup, and these masks later evolved into a full body inner coffin into this human shape with the same decorations and ornaments. So if you see some like Tutankhamun's coffin, like how it still has that face on it, like, and it's like a whole body, like that is what it means by like it kind of progressed into like the whole coffin was pretty much that human shape. Another thing was ritual masks, which were worn by priests during rituals, and these were made from cartonnage and then painted, and they were made with to look like animal heads, heads of gods of ancient Egypt, and then there was the head of Anubis, god of death, with the head of jackal, and that was worn during funeral ceremonies and so on and so forth. So as you can see, masks were definitely a very important part of the ancient Egyptian culture and their death. Like I mentioned before, they were very obsessed with the ritual, and everything they did after death was very important to make sure that the body and soul would move to its next life.